Hi, this is Walter Weesey with Yellowstone Country Fly Fishing, and this is my weekly Montana Guide Flies video for Valentine's Day. Actually, day before Valentine's Day, maybe. See when I get it up. But what I'm doing here is a variation on an old pattern of mine called a Prom Queen Salmonfly, and I was never really happy with how I did the pattern. It worked okay, but it didn't float all that well, and it got fouled a lot. And so I've been playing with it, and this is kind of the new variation of it. So improved Prom Queen Salmonfly. And the big thing here is you notice this body, this uses the same technique as I did on my most recent instructional video. And this is actually yarn. It's yarn that's been twisted and furled back on itself rather than foam. And as you can see there, I can move that really well. And so once that's in the water, that's going to move really well. Unlike foam, which I often find is very, very stiff and not very imitative. Then the other factor is that body material on that. You got the extended body, which is yarn, and then the body is also basically yarn that I've chopped up and turned into dubbing here. And then a little foam on it, little glitter foam. I don't know if that's going to show up, but that foam actually has some sparkle to it. Synthetic wing and another foam head, a whole bunch of legs. So there's going to be a lot of movement there, and that's going to be also a lot easier to tie than a lot of your big foam salmonfly patterns that use like a hair wing. But still almost as easy to tie as a Chubby Chernobyl, but I think it's a little bit more imitative. Okay, so my hook in the vise here is a 2XL hopper hook in size 6. And this is mostly the size I tie these in. If I was going to tie a golden stone, I'd cut down on the materials and then tie it in a size 10 probably. And for the first part of this fly, you want to use a pretty heavy thread. This is 3/0 black. And I'm just going to come in and form a thread base down to basically directly over the tip of the hook point there. And then my body on this fly is going to be Aunt Lydia's rug yarn in burnt orange, and you're going to want 2 strands of that, so it's actually 6 total strands because it's a 3-strand yarn. And then go and watch my video from a few days ago about how to create the body here, but you can probably see that I'm twisting this until it gets really, really tight on itself. And this is a really short chunk. I should have made this a little bit longer. But basically twisting that up, and then I put my finger in the middle and then grab the end, let it kind of twist back on itself. And that's how I create the extended body here. I'm going to tie that in about like so. So maybe you see the portion of the hook shank here that's beyond the bend. Basically that same distance back behind the bend, something on that order. And what I'm going to do here is make about 3 or 4 really, really tight wraps, as tight as I can get them basically. And then that's not really enough to actually bind that into place, but I'm going to take those 4 strands. You see how that's kind of fuzzed out now. And I'm going to start trimming here. And what I'm not doing is trying to make these, perfect. I'm not trying to actually cut it all off. What I'm doing here is kind of creating a gradual taper, which I'm then going to glue in place and then bind over. And then now what I'm doing is getting everything situated on top of that hook shank. And then I'll come in with my super glue here. I'm going to just gob that onto that thread base. And now I'm going to go over it, those tag ends with my thread. And I found that binds this all in much, much better than just trying to rely on thread. All right, now that done, I'm going to go ahead and tie in my tails, which are brown barred sexy floss. You could also just use brown barred conventional rubber legs here. And I basically want those facing back, one on either side of the hook. And I'll trim these all to shape here, eventually. You see how those are wildly different lengths. I'm going to clean that up. And then my body on this fly is going to be dubbing made from that same Aunt Lydia's yarn, but this is basically 2 parts orange, the burnt orange, 1 part black, and then also 2 parts of orange, just acrylic craft yarn. This is see how that's a little brighter. What this looks like actually when you don't have that acrylic in there is, number one, it's a lot darker, but then you see how kind of coarse this is. This is not really dubbable, at least for a dry fly on its own. And so you have to mix in some acrylic or rabbit or something to actually make it work for a dry fly. And you can kind of see how on the body of this fly, the taper there, it's kind of reverse tapered at the moment. So I'm going to need more dubbing at the front than at the back. And I am still using that black 3/0 thread, partially because I want that black to actually show through a little bit. I'd rather have black on the body of this fly, because if you actually look at the body on a salmon fly, towards the back they're kind of a sooty orange usually. And I think a lot of the foam patterns kind of leave out that sooty part, is I guess what I'm kind of saying here. All right, so now I'm going to need some more dubbing. And basically, what I do to make this dubbing is I just chop it all up in a dubbing blender, by which I mean a coffee grinder. I could probably loop dub this, but this is only about the 5th one of these I've tied, so I'm still kind of working at it. Okay, now the kind of rear pair of legs here. 6. I actually have, except for the fact that I don't have any antennae on this fly, I have kind of a realistic number of appendages on this fly, so to speak, and that's mostly to provide more movement. One of the problems I had with my original pattern of this is that it just didn't move well enough, because it only had 2 legs, and so I've got 6 on this one. I'm just going to add a little bit more dubbing right in front here, mostly to keep that stuff propped back. Okay, and then from here on out, I'm going to spiral forward a little bit. I'm going to whip finish. And then I'm going to shift to 6/0 orange, fluorescent fire orange thread. I really think if you look at an adult salmon fly that's just, again, giant black stonefly, they typically are going to have a couple really much more kind of obvious bright bands of orange towards the front. And so I always like using a bright orange thread at the front of the bug. But the next step here, and I'm kind of doing things a little out of order from how you usually do them, but I think it comes out being easier and looking better. I've got a strand or a piece of burnt orange Evizote foam. This is Montana Fly Company high-rise foam in 2mm burnt orange, and it's you can see there, that's a fairly narrow strip of foam. I don't want a whole lot of foam on this, because I do have 6mm at the front of the fly, and then 2mm going all the way back, plus a big fluffy wing. So I'm just going to poke a hole in that and pop that over the eye. Maybe I should have poked a bigger hole. There we go. And then what I do here is I'm going to make sure my thread is all the way up, kind of right at the eye behind that foam. And I'm going to bind it in on the underside of the eye here, right behind the eye, with about 4 turns. And so it should look like that now. Then I'm going to kind of take my thread over that, work back to the back end of that thread base without binding it in. And then I'm just going to take 1 or 2 turns here, kind of to bind that right in front of those legs. And I will clean everything up here eventually. All right, now I'm going to tie in kind of my underwing, and this is a black glitter foam. You could use regular black foam. You could use the kind of stuff with venations on it. You could use brown foam. I kind of like this black glitter stuff because the fish don't see as much of it, and it gives the fly a little flash. I'm going to come in and kind of just measure that. And I don't want that to go quite all the way to the end here. I find that it just doesn't need to. And so I'm going to measure that, and then I'm going to trim it just so that the tip of that black is going to be almost at the front of the fly here. And I might have cut that a little short, but the fish won't care. Now what I'm going to do is just bind that in kind of directly over the orange with a couple turns, maybe 2 or 3 turns, and then I'm going to start applying super glue again here. I'm going to put a dab of super glue on the thread wraps and that kind of top side of that orange strip, And I'm going to mash that together like so. And that's going to anchor everything, and you can see I'm holding that long enough to really bind together. Okay, now my wing on this fly, and this is an area which I might very well change eventually. This is Montana Fly Company Widow's Web, and I'm putting my hand up there so you can actually see the color. This is either silver or smoke. It's kind of a light gray. I can't remember which I used. You could probably use tan here. You could probably mix a light tan and a brown to get the venation effect of a salmon fly wing. But functionally, from here on out, this is like tying in a chubby wing. So what I'm going to do is come in, and I've trimmed that to length here. Again, that's, gray yarn, kind of looks like my shirt. I've trimmed that to length, but as soon as you start wiggling it in your fingers, it kind of unevens it a little bit. And so you get kind of a taper effect. It's obviously not really tapered, but it's kind of a taper effect just by kind of manipulating it. So I don't like to cut it after I tie it in. I cut it first and then move it around a little bit, and that kind of creates a taper. And actually, I just realized I forgot something here. One more step on the super glue. You see how my foam strip is sticking up in the air here. I don't want that. So I'm going to come in again with my super glue and put that on kind of the flash side of that black flash foam. And I'm not binding this to the extended body. I'm only binding that to the top of the dubbed body so that everything's free to wiggle back here. But that's going to create a lower profile. It's not going to be sticking up in the air wanting the fly to be cockeyed. If you don't bind this in somehow, it's going to stick up too high and the fly might twirl, or it might just ride on its side. That's actually why I like this style of fly. You see how there's so much metal back here. There's going to be foam on the top of the fly. That's what it's going to ride. It's going to ride, essentially here is where the water level will be, especially at the back end of the fly. But with this much metal hanging behind the fly, that's going to keel over, and it's going to pull the back end of the fly into the water, and that actually helps it ride correctly. A lot of these foam dries, really big foam flies, especially with 2 or 3 layers of foam, simply just don't ride right. Okay, now that I got that out of the way, I'm going to come in, and I want my wing to be basically to the end of the body here. You can kind of experiment either to the end of the foam body or the end of the extended body, somewhere in that ballpark. And I'm just going to come in and bind that on top of the black foam with a couple turns. I've got my synthetic scissors here. And I cut that basically as short as I possibly can, so that right now I've just got a stubble there. Now that is not going to last. If I, actually fished with this, the instant I caught a fish on it, that would pop right out. So one more time on the super glue. I'm going to apply this kind of to the butts of the wing and the remaining portion of that black foam there, like that. And then again, I bring my top over in a couple turns. Now on my next step here is just kind of final step is I'm going to tie in two more legs here, one on each side. So what I like to do is take that, slide it up like so. I'm going to do the other one on my side. Then give that 2 or 3 good wraps. And then if you find, like I have on my side, you see how this particular leg is kind of back too much. I find that what you can do is just put a turn or 2 behind it, and that'll serve to kind of separate things. So I do want those to kind of be distinct if possible. All right, now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and whip finish, and I'll just whip finish right over this tie-off point. And then now I'm going to trim my foam here that's kind of behind my tie-off point, fairly short there. I've already trimmed the top piece, and you can leave that kind of whichever length you want. That's also going to serve as, number one, it's more flotation. It's also your indicator. That's one of the reasons I like using the orange foam for the head of this fly. Now it's kind of time to do some coloring here. So I've got a black Sharpie, and I'm actually going to darken most of this head foam here. And you don't have to be perfect with this. It's just that, just straight orange for the head of the fly in particular would be much too bright. And so I'm just kind of covering up a lot of that orange while still letting some of it peek through. That's kind of the best way I've found of getting the sort of overall sort of bright but subdued but bright. I know that doesn't make any sense. Coloration, because if you actually look at the head of a salmonfly, they have kind of chaotic black and orange on the head especially, and then little flecks of black kind of throughout the body as well. And then one thing that's completely optional is you can come in and, because the back end of the fly here is going to be in the water, this is actually a pretty good imitation of an egg-laying stonefly. The females come back and flutter their abdomens across the water, and their egg sacs are kind of black. And so you see there, I've just darkened the tip of that. That's totally optional. I just think it looks cool. Okay, and then final step here is going to actually make some sense of all this mess I've got here. So I'm going to take all of my front legs, pull them up like that, and then trim those to length, and that's about right. And then I'll do the same thing in the back. And I want the back legs, the tails, to be considerably longer than the, maybe not considerably longer than the abdomen, but at least longer than the abdomen. But anyway, there you have it. That is a Prom Queen Salmonfly, kind of a improved Prom Queen Salmonfly, I hope. And I'm seeing here that I just left that wing a little bit too long, so I'm going to trim that. And like I said, I don't actually like to do that on a wing, and so what I'm going to do to kind of fix that, because right now I don't think it looks very good, is I'm going to look for my taperizing scissors here, and I'm actually going to give that a little haircut, which I can't find my tapering scissors right now, but what I'll actually do, I've got a tapering scissor like a barber, and I'll come in and I'll trim out a little bit here at the tips of that to make it look uneven like I was talking about earlier. But anyhow, I'm really looking forward to fishing this pattern. I think it's going to work really well. I put this on Instagram, and I said when a fishing or a fly tire starts cackling with glee on a new fly, they know it's going to work. But I think that'll also be super adaptable. I think I can probably tie that, maybe a shorter body on it and tie it as a hopper as well. And yeah, looking forward to experimenting with that. As always, thanks for watching, and feel free to get in touch to book any guide trips for the 2025 season. I'm certainly booking trips now, not as many as I would like, but more than last year at this point. And if you find this video helpful or any of my other content helpful, click the Buy Me a Coffee link in the pattern description and throw me a buck or two. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.